David Shannon. Let's begin.
Camilla Cream loved green beans, but she never ate them.
All of her friends hated languages, and she wanted to fit in. Camilla was always worried about what other people thought of her.
Today, she was fretting even more than usual. It was the very first day of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress.
She tried on 44 outfits, but none of them seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror. Then she screamed.
Her mother ran into the room, and she screamed.
Ah! Oh my heavens, you're completely covered in stripes!
She cried. This was certainly true. Camilla was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow.
Mrs. Cream felt Camilla's forehead.
Do you feel all right? She asked.
I feel fine, but just look at me.
Camilla answered.
You get back into bed this instant. You're not going to school today,
Her mother ordered. Camilla was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say, and she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes.
That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camilla.
Most extraordinary! I've never seen anything like it. I have any coughing, sneezing, coughing, sneezing, runny nose, aches, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, uncontrollable twitching. He asked.
I feel fine.
Well then, I don't see any reason why she shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's the point that will help clear up those rights in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me.
Dr. Bumble said, turning to Mrs. Cream, and off he went.
The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camilla. They called her Camilla Cream and Night of the Living Lollipop.
She tried her best as if everything were normal, but when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out into stars.
The other kids stopped Mrs. Cream. One yelled out.
Let's see some purple polka dots.
Sure enough, Camilla turned all polka dotty. Someone else shouted,
Checkerboards!
and a pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon everyone was calling out different shapes and colors, and poor Camilla was changing faster than you can change channels on a TV.
That night, Mr. Hunt was both.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Cream. I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camilla home from school. She's just too much of a distraction, and I've been getting phone calls from the other parents. They're afraid those stripes may be contagious.
He said. Camilla was so embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago everyone liked her. Now nobody wanted to be in the same room as her.
Her mother tried to make her feel better.
Is there anything I can do for you, sweetheart?
No, sighed Camilla. What she really wanted was a nice plate of omelette, but she'd been laughing enough for one day.
Oh, well, yes, I see. I think I'd better bring in a specialist. We'll be right over.
Said Dr. Bumble to Miss Cream on the phone. About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creamers.
This is all my doctors.
Then the specialist went to work on Camilla. They squeezed and jabbed and tapped and tested. It was very uncomfortable.
Replied the specialist.
Try this. Try this. Take one of each before bed, said the specialist. Then they each handed her a bottle filled with different color pills. Then they filled out the front door, followed by Dr. Bumble.
That night, Camilla took medicine. It was awful.
When she woke up the next morning, she did feel different, but when she got dressed, no, it was too late. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant multicolored pill with a face.
Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. Cream called, but this time, instead of the specialist, he he brought the experts.
Dr. Gordon and Mr. Mello were the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camilla was poked and prodded, looked at and listened.
The experts wrote down lots of numbers. Then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Gord finally spoke.
He announced with authority. Suddenly, fuzzy little virus balls appeared all over the world. Or possibly some form of bacteria,
Said Mr. Mellon. Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails all over Camilla.
Added Dr. Gord instantly. Instantly, Camilla was covered with different color from the splotches. The experts looked at Camilla, then each other.
Said the experts. But the expert didn't have a clue, much less a cure.
By now, the TV news had found out about Camilla. Reporters from every channel were outside her house, telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible change in TV.
Soon a huge crowd of people was camped out on the front lawn.
The creams were swapped with all kinds of remedies from psychologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionists, physics, an old medicine man, a guru, and even a veterinarian.
Each so-called cure only added to poor Camilla's strange appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted out roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail, but nothing really worked.
One day, a woman called herself an environmental therapist claimed she could cure Camilla. She said,
Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and become one with your roots. Camilla groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls of the room. Her bed became her mouth, her nose was a dresser, and 2 paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran from the house.
What are we going to do? It just keeps getting worse and worse.
Cried Mrs. Cream. She began to sob.
At that moment, Mrs. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the front door. She opened it, and there stood an old woman who was as plump as sweet as a strawberry.
Excuse me, I think I can help.
she said brightly.
She went into Camilla's room and looked around.
My goodness, what we have here, that is the stripes. One of the best I've ever seen.
She said with a shake of her head. She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. She said,
Here, these might do the trick.
Are those magic beans?
Asked
Oh,
Mrs.
my.
Cream.
Oh,
The
my.
old woman replied.
Oh my goodness, that's like these just plain old wine. I bet you like some, wouldn't you?
Yuck, no one likes slime beans, especially me.
Oh dear, guess I was wrong about you.
Said the old woman sadly. She put her beans back in her bag and started to walk slowly toward the door.
Camilla was the old woman warned. Those beans would taste so good. And being laughed at for eating, that was nothing. But compared to what she'd been going through, she finally couldn't stand it.
Wait, the truth is, I really love lemon.
I thought so.
She cried. The old woman smiled, popping a handful of beans into Camilla's mouth and said,
Yes, I knew the lily was in there somewhere.
She patted Camilla on the head and went outside and vanished into the crowd.
afterwards, Camilla wasn't quite the same after all.
Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but she didn't care a bit.
She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never had a touch of the stripes again.